we are also very proud to share that we have some actual newspapers that taken, of course, the day of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and are happy to share with our visitors here some artifacts that are relevant to the Civil War, including some books. For the friends here in the state of Washington, is a new book that just came out about Lincoln and the Oregon County politics during the Civil War era. So I like to move over here because 1963 then celebrates, namely now 50 years ago, celebrates the famous I Had a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. Now, you notice in the middle there we have Alan Locke. And one might ask and wonder why. Well, the reason is that Martin Luther King celebrated Alan Locke, of course, the father of the Harlem Renaissance and the Baha'i, celebrates Alan Locke as one of the foremost philosophers of his time, including Du Bois, of course, whose wife did become a Baha'i. But here we then take a moment to ponder upon the long journey that as we call it, the colored race, the destiny of the colored American, is the destiny of America, which started with Frederick Douglass, then Martin Luther King, and then eventually, as we shared here, dreams do come true. Now I just want to turn around for a minute here. We have an opportunity to share the 50th anniversary of the first election of the Universal House of Justice, and so we created here an ambiance that reflects, and we have some old treasured books on this sort of Victorian 150th year ago table, a journal from a young lady of Virginia written in 1781, and very shortly after that, we, let me just move this, talk a little bit about the women of the colonial and revolutionary times. It's a little bit earlier, however, just to sort of reflect how far we have come in this country now. Out of this very long and arduous journey, it's what we really now sort of term as our wall of suffering and the long and arduous journey that it has taken to bring us to today a more tolerant society. But we are remembering the Trail of Tears, where 4,000 of the 13,000 relocated Cherokees lost their lives, and 2,000 African-American free blacks and slaves owned by the Cherokees were part of that. We have an opportunity to talk about the torture and genocide of over 20,000 followers of the Baha'i faith, just briefly before the Civil War between 1844 and 1850. The arrival of the first black pioneer into the state of Washington. His name was George Washington Bush. We also share the suffering of the first Japanese to reach our state in 1844. They were young Japanese men who were stranded on the shores of Washington. They were found and held temporarily as slaves by the Makah Indians, but later were relieved. To remember also, in 1860, our first Chinese settlers arrived, and by 1886, there were some anti-Chinese riots in the city of Seattle. So we want to remember that beginnings and the arrival of settlers was a very difficult and arduous journey. So down here we have the story of the Trail of Tears, and we remember our Chinese friends with the Chinese the Promise of World Peace statement. A wonderful compilation that remembers a message to the Indian and Eskimo Baha'is of the Western Hemisphere by Ruhir Khanum, and of course the suffering of our Baha'i early Babis, and a Japanese prayer book, along with the kimono. We are very proud to have here on loan an 1860 split buffalo hide traditional dress, beautifully beaded. I might want to go up to some of this beadwork here. Beautifully beaded, given on loan by wonderful Baha'i couple living on the reservation in Polsbo, Steve and Rita Old Coyote. And we really want to thank you for this generous offering during this time period. Down here we have our library that talks about the history of Washington, and to remember really how whilst our settlers on the East Coast had beautiful gowns and dresses, but it was our slave women were literally dressed in very coarse burlap. And so Shirley Ballard sewed this beautiful dress for us. And just sort of getting a little bit closer here, we have remembering slavery day, our early slavery days, when we can see the sales of slaves, meaning paying as little as $1,200 per slave. And we have a variety of photographs to remember this early cruel days, and have an opportunity to talk about that.